Uh, Always seems to happen. So the first part would have been missed by some of you, but thank you for joining us live. That's an exclusive part for you. So this is to get to know a bit about you. And finally, before I welcome Arran to tell us a bit about the Museum Data Service and the services they offer, uh, how familiar are you with the service? So it'd be interesting to find out how familiar you are. And then at the end, we'll ask another question, which is, are you familiar with the service now? Which we all know that will be a yes, I'm sure. So good to know that, a few of you are new to this service. I myself haven't not familiar with the Museum Data Service, but I'm also looking forward to hearing Aaron's talk. We organized this a couple months ago now, so I've been looking forward to this one, and we'll see how we get on. So I can see we're still waiting on a few of you to respond to this. So let us know. Are you familiar with the MDS or the Museum Data Service? And then I will hand over to Aaron, who will be able to tell us more about what we're doing today. So at this point, I will say if you do have any questions, please do write them in the chat. We'll then come to those at the end. If we don't have time today, we will send all of our questions over to Arran and ask him kindly to respond to those. We'll put them into a thank you email for anyone, any colleagues who weren't able to attend today, or if you have to jump off at any point, we'll have those circulated with you, as well as some information about our next webinar in May that will come to a bit later on as well. But I think at this point, I will hand over to Arran. So I'll just stop sharing, hand over to our speaker today. So Arran, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the Digital Research Infrastructure webinar series. Take it away.
Thank you very much. Hopefully you can all see the presentation, and if you can get a thumbs up, that would be great. Brilliant. And then I'll just start going then. So yeah, thank you, Al. Thank you, Joy, for having me. Yeah, I've been really looking forward to this as well. So I'm Arran Rees. I am the Museum Data Manager for the Museum Data Service. And yeah, today I'm just going to talk a little bit about what the Museum Data Service is and how you can use the data that we have. So I am normally used to speaking to museums. My main role is really helping the museums join. So this has been a really nice kind of opportunity to just think about what it means to use the data, the different ways that we can make the data available. And it's something that we are looking for feedback on. We're definitely interested in developing further. So it'll be great to have your thoughts, your questions, and everything that comes from that. So without further ado, I'll dip into it. So what we're going to try and do in this session, first of all, what is the Museum Data Service? So we'll give a bit of background and context to it, what kind of things we have, what type of data we have available, how the data is accessed, and then how can that data be used. So I feel like they are the kind of the main things that we can focus on today, but hopefully there'll be some time for some questions as well. So if I haven't touched on anything you were expecting or hoping, then you can let me know. So the Museum Data Service is a transformative digital infrastructure that aims to connect all the object records of all UK museums, providing raw material for researchers, curators, and anyone else wanting to work with this wealth of knowledge. So that's kind of our strapline. That's what we're working with, and that's our purpose. We started as a partnership. So the partnership is between Art UK, Collections Trust, and the University of Leicester. And those three partners have been working together to kind of create the Museum Data Service. And we still actually are working together. I'm actually an employee of Collections Trust. I spend 90% of my time on the Museum Data Service. So we put those three partner organizations that are like the core of it. But the Museum Data Service itself now is its own entity. It's its own organization. We'll be applying for charitable status as well. So yeah, it's a connected kind of program there. We initially started up with a startup grant from Bloomberg Philanthropies. That is what helped create and launch the Museum Data Service. And now we are one of the AHRC IDA funded infrastructures. And we've had our second round of IDA funding as well, and we're funded for the next 2 years. And we're hoping that will continue because there's a really great cohort of infrastructures around the humanities kind of coming together through this IDA funding. And yeah, it's a really great cohort and great community to be working a part of. So that's kind of where we come from. And as I said, University of Leicester, Collections Trust and Art UK are still really heavily involved in kind of how the Museum Data Service runs. We kind of have these two hats. I always think of it as two hats anyway. They're connected, but we're trying to do two particular things, I think. First of all, we are a research infrastructure. So one of our core aims is to enable better object-based research across the museum sector. I think for a long time, archives are readily used by researchers, libraries, and kind of the special collections there are really well used. Museum collections have always been used for research, but they haven't had that kind of same availability, I think, for this kind of mass digital research. So that's something that we really want to kind of help enable. Um, we're really hoping to kind of work with researchers. We want to kind of work as open and collaborative, and that's kind of part of how we're designed. We want to enable fair data practices with museum collections, and we want to provide data in raw formats. And I think that will be quite important when we look at the actual data structure later. We're not kind of we're almost like the standpipes or the kind of the plumbing that allows the data to come out, and it's not all kind of normalized and structured in some way. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. But as well as being that kind of research infrastructure, we're also providing infrastructure for the museum sector. So we are a free service for making digital catalogue records available. So that is something that a lot of museums have been coming to us for. Um, we've had get collections online that have never been online before, never been searchable in any way. Um, we're also hoping to essentially be the place where cross-searching across the UK museum collections happen. Again, there have been a few attempts at this, and I'll touch on that, but we've kind of got the furthest that we've ever got with that, and I think there's a real traction now in the sector for this. We're also able to be backup of last resort for a lot of museums. So for those of you unfamiliar with the museum sector, it's really broad. You've got your V&A and your British Museum and your science museums that are well funded. Well, they might not argue that, but relatively well funded organizations, huge in structure. And then you've got your thousands of small museums, volunteer run museums, and there's a kind of massive range of skills and capabilities within that. So if we're able to act as a backup of a last resort for some of the smaller collections, then that's a fantastic thing for their collections data. And then also we want to be a strategic tool across the sector as well. So helping curators and exhibition planners, thinking about new acquisitions and disposals, really thinking strategically about what is in your local area and being able to search what else is out there as part of decision making. So that's kind of where we are. So how big is this task? Well, there are over 1,700 accredited museums, and then many, many more unaccredited museums, and we're open to museums whether or not they are accredited or not. And we're also open to self-identifying museums as well. So we say museums and museum-like organizations without actually defining what museum-like means. So again, we're open to kind of public open collections that catalogue in museum styles, I guess. There are many, many hundreds of individual collection websites that a researcher would have to try and search across, and MDS is hopefully going to be the one source for being able to search across all of those. We know this kind of circa 80 million existing object records is out of date and vastly underestimated. But that's the kind of only figure that we can kind of point out at the moment. But there's much more than that. And they're just digital object records in collections management systems, not the amount of objects there are. And of that, less than 50% are available. And that figure is actually somewhat skewed by the large organizations like the Natural History Museum making millions of their collections records available. And yeah, I think that doesn't really represent the number of, or the percentage properly. Is much less than that, really. So I said that I was going to give a potted history. So the first time that we tried to start bringing together museum collections was in 1888 when there was a call for a compendious index of museum collections. And some work's happened since then, but it's never really got anywhere. Most of them have stopped and stalled at some point. Um, and in 2024, the Museum Data Service launched. Um, and we have an ambitious target of getting all museum object records available online by 2034. So yeah, we'll see. We'll keep an eye on how that develops. So now I am just going to talk to you a little bit more about what sort of data is on the Museum Data Service. So I don't know if any of you have been on our website, but essentially there are two specific sections of the data that we have. We have exploring collections and searching objects. So this exploring collection section is where we call our level one and two data. Don't really need to know the levels, but essentially it's where we have information about the collections, the museums. We're using the term collections because, as I said, there are kind of NHS art collections on there as well who do not formally constitute as a museum. So we just want to be a bit more inclusive of the language there about how an organization is set up. But essentially, what we have at this kind of level one information is whether or not a museum exists, what they're called, whether or not they're a service, whether or not they're a standalone museum, just kind of really trying to set out a map of what the museum sector looks like in the UK. At the moment, this is accredited museums, and over the summer, we'll be adding all the non-accredited museums as well. So that will be a nice addition to make this a much fuller picture. Then in this kind of level two data, we have more narrative overviews of what is in a museum's collection. So many museums, I've mentioned accredited museums. Essentially, accreditation in museums is a formal process that museums go through to say that they are acting professionally and of a certain level, and they get the accreditation status. As part of becoming an accredited museum, you have to have a collections development policy which has a narrative overview of what's in the collection. And we've just been saying to museums, why don't you just let us have that and we'll put it on the website. And essentially, what it starts to look like is a finding aid, a kind of top level approach to us understanding what might be in museum collections, even if we don't have all their object records on the Museum Data Service. We've got these kind of narrative descriptions that people can start mining and understanding where museums feel they have strengths in their collections. So we've got a good couple of hundred of these on the Museum Data Service now, and we're always looking for more. And that's part of what I do when I onboard museums as well, is also make sure that their collections overviews are up to date and things like that. So you can see here, yeah, this is what Aberdeen Archives and Gallery and Museums looks like. You can see that it's a service and that it says what other museums are part of the service. And then we have these kind of narrative overviews of it underneath. And they're also an example of a museum that does have object records on the Museum Data Service. And then you can click through to that and it will take you to those object records. So that's kind of level two data. And that is what's in the Explore Collection section. We've also got a map view, so you can see here the different museums available on the map. We're just using kind of latitude and longitude to do that. And then we've got our level 3 data. So that's taking us out of the kind of exploring collection section and looking straight into the object section. So this is a different process that we go through to bring kind of actual exports of collections management systems into the Museum Data Service. Um, and this is really structured by a brief summary. So it's normally the title, an object name, a brief description, and the collection name. And then you can kind of click on that record and it will expand to show you every single field we have available. So yeah, the internal fire museum of power is just the greatest name for a museum, I think. It's an amazing museum of kind of engines in West Wales somewhere. It's great. They've got over 700,000 object records on here now. It's really fantastic. So yeah, they're a really good kind of example, and this is kind of what the object records look like. So you can search there. You can search by a few different filters as well. One thing we get asked a lot is, do we have any images? And no, we don't take images. So we are kind of a metadata provider. Um, there are two kind of core reasons here. We are looking to be a kind of affordable service, I suppose, and a sustainable service. So if we started taking a copy of every digital asset related to collections in museums, then we'd quickly become an affordable service to run as we're set up. So we just wanted to address the initial issue of kind of getting the data out there, and then we think we want to work with colleagues then and other sector bodies to really address the problem of digital asset storage. And also, at the moment, we license the metadata, but we don't license it. The museums license the metadata, and we're clear about that. And then adding images into that complicates the kind of IP status of a lot of the material. So again, we're dealing with the data first, and then we can sometimes say an image exists of this object record because it's indicated in the metadata, or if the museum hosts their own images with a URL, if they're using IIIF standards, then we can kind of link to those images that are displayed outside of the Museum Data Service interface. So an example of a museum that does this would be the National Museums Northern Ireland. So they have their own URLs for their images. You click on that because we've surfaced it in the data, and then that takes you into a different tab and you can see the image. So really, how the whole thing works essentially is we work with museums. They upload their data to a piece of middleware we're using called the SIM. Stands for Collections Information Integration Middleware. I do some mapping and processing of that data. We sign the agreements. We push that data through to our live website where it can be searched and queried by kind of researchers and curators alike, and then either downloaded or accessed via APIs. That's it kind of in a little nutshell, a little diagram here. So now I want to go on to talk a little bit more about what the data actually looks like. Um, we do some mapping of the data. I mentioned that kind of quite quickly, but essentially, what we don't do is normalize the data, but we do map and align the fields. So we call it like a pragmatic mapping rather than using a prescribed schema or a kind of data standard. So Spectrum is a collections management standard that's used throughout the museum sector. And as part of Spectrum, there is a area of that called the kind of units of information. And the units of information essentially defined concepts of what information is being asked to be recorded during a range of different collections management processes. So what I do with the data when it arrives in the Museum Data Service middleware is I align the field concepts. I take field names that come from spreadsheets or 6 different systems, and I align them under this concept of what a type of data is. Um, so kind of the units of information are all available on the Collections Trust website, and they're all defined there. So this is how you might find information about what they are. And I think there's a job for us to do to kind of bring this onto the Museum Data Service website as well. But essentially, it's a definition of what the unit is, how you should record the term, how you should, not how it is normally, um, and how to use it essentially. So we've got that kind of information that people can help that can help people understand what they're looking at in terms of the data. Um, and essentially, what it does is it goes some way in creating interoperability in the data, even when the data itself isn't standardized. So one system may call something place made, another would call it production place. But what I do is I map both of those to object production place, which is the formal spectrum unit of information name. So no matter where the data's come from, if it's to do with a place that something was made, it will be called object production place on the Museum Data Service. It seems quite simple, but it's actually quite effective. Even if it doesn't result in standardized data, it results in conceptually standardized data, I guess. Um, so this is two examples of what the data might look like if you try to pull it out of Museum Data Service. So on the left there's a CSV export, where it's a quick and simple CSV that brings out some of the basic information. We've got a PID, so the MDS record link we call it, but it's a PID. We've got the collection name, an object number, an object name, a title, and a description. Or we could look at bringing out the data in JSON, and have a much bigger record with all the information available. And here you've got kind of information from Ilfracombe Museum. It's a piece, a cigarette packet wreath, apparently. So yeah, all sorts of things you find in museums. Um, so this is kind of how you might access or start looking at the data and playing with it. What I like to call the data is semi-structured messy data. Um, and here's an example of kind of two object records from the Museum Data Service. Um, and I think the dimensions section is quite interesting here. This is a kind of way you might find where it's easiest to describe how the different kind of the non-standardized but semi kind of organized data is. So you can see on the left here for this advertisement from Port Sunlight Museum, they have dimensions that are a bit more structured. They have a width defined with then a value underneath that. And the spectrum unit of information would allow you to define that even further. So you could have a value and then the measurement unit might not be in the value field. It could be in another structured unit underneath that. So you can make it it's quite extensible in how you can structure it. But that depends on how the museum is catalogued. We see then on the right-hand side from the Devon Exeter Institution, they just write their dimensions in one single field without the structure. And what we can't do, and what we don't do because we don't edit the data itself, is restructure that to make it all in the same format. So we know it's a dimension, and that's helpful, but it's not broken down and structured in the same way. And there are a few reasons why we felt this was probably the best way to be. Um, we're quite keen that the museums remain the data controllers. It's their data, and we are simply a conduit to providing access to it. There is also research to be done into the nature of cataloging in museums. For a long time, museums have been. I'm not bad-mouthing museums. I'm from museums. I love them. I love them dearly. But museums have been maybe an outlier in terms of like the approach to standard structured cataloging that you might find across GLAMs. And actually, I think it's interesting to have that kind of raw record of what the catalog data actually looks like, and any kind of attempts to normalize it in structure would come with losses in the reality of what the data is like. We kind of agreed that any structure that we chose would be not right for some. The Museum Data Service is not just for humanities researchers, it's for all types of researchers. So if we chose to standardize it in a certain way, that might not be the right way for one researcher, but it might be the right way for another. So we're saying actually it's on the researcher to restructure the data in the way that works for them. So that's, I think, a core piece to be taken from the Museum Data Service there. I'm going to go on and talk a little bit about accessing data. So there's kind of level one and two bits of data, the collection descriptions, the overview. That can be searched via the website, and you can use it. It's all clearly licensed. It's all licensed under a CC by NC license. And at the moment, we have an API in development to be able to access that. But for now, if you really need to access to it, then you could just email this, and I can provide an export of that data. It will come in a kind of spreadsheet format. Then the level three data, so the kind of object records themselves. Again, you can search and access via the website for a reference. You can do a basic CSV download of the summary information for up to 1,000 records. If you want more than 1,000 records, or if you want a full structured record, including all the fields, then you'll need to go via the API extract service. That essentially is a big API an API that extracts the data, allows you to kind of go away and work on it rather than it be a live queryable API. Then we do have a search API in development, in testing to be released later this year. And that's a queryable API. And if you do really need access to that, then you can get in contact with us, and because it's in testing, we can probably arrange something. So this is probably not a great slide to kind of read quickly. So because I'll be sharing my slides, you can have a look at it then. But essentially, we have these three APIs. Two of them are in development, annoyingly, but one of them is up and running. But yeah, the collections data API will be essentially a WordPress API that allows you to access that data for the collections overviews. The object search API is in testing and will be released soon, and allows you access to full object metadata. And when you request an API token there, which would be a process that you have to kind of ask for it beforehand, they are persistent for 10 years. So if you're building tools using the Museum Data Service, then it's not something you have to kind of update once a year. And then we have the object extract API, which allows you to download a data set and go away and work on it. And that is up and running. And we also have a useful tool called the data fetcher, which provides a nice user interface for less technical users to use that as well. And it kind of looks like this. I say like nice interface is a nice simple interface. You get a token, you paste it in there, then you execute it, it starts loading the records, and then you can choose if you want to download it in a CSV or whatever. So that's kind of how it looks. So then we'll come on to how the data can be used. So now we've looked at what the structure of the data is, what we're all about, how you can get access to that data. The next thing we really want to be clear about is how that data can be used. So most of the data is published under one of those kind of three Creative Commons licenses there. So CC0, CC BY, or CC BY NC. We offer flexibility of licensing, so some museums have opted for other licenses, but they are all referenced in a consistent place in the object record, so you should know exactly what you can and can't do with the object data. So here we've got kind of on the left-hand side, you can filter when you're searching for collections by license. So you can see the CC BY, NC, and CC0 are the most commonly used ones, but we have also got a collection that used CC BY SA themselves and wanted to replicate that on the MDS. And the Royal Armouries have a specific non-commercial license with very specific wording that they wanted to replicate as well. So again, we allowed that to happen rather than force them to use a license predefined by us. Um, I mean, that maybe some people would think that complicates things a little bit, but because we record that in a consistent place in the object records, we're quite comfortable with it. It also means that museums aren't forced into doing things they're uncomfortable with, and we become a much more open and productive service to work with for the museums. Um, so you can see there on the object record, if you go down to the bottom of that, you can see that there's a use license for this record that's clearly there, and in the attribution of the record as well, we're clearly saying this is how you attribute the record, and that includes the license as well. And I'm just going to quickly talk to you about a few case studies. They're really kind of simple ones for now, and then we'll have time for some questions as well. But essentially, the data is being used in a few different ways. We haven't got much in terms of understanding of exactly how it's being used in people's research. We know there are lots of API calls for people doing their kind of dissertations and things like that happening at the moment, but we haven't got any kind of those results to talk about. But here are some nice projects that have been kind of set up using the MDS APIs. This is the Southwest Collections Explorer, and it's a kind of group of museums in the Southwest that wanted to have a way to do collaborative searches of their collections in a more localized, aggregated way, and also bring images of their collections into it. Um, it's led by the Royal Albert Memorial Museum, and it was a heritage funded project. And essentially, the museums join the Museum Data Service. We are that kind of free digital infrastructure that allows them to get their collections online for the first time. And then the museum platform, which is the tool that the Southwest Collections Explorer uses, kind of queries our API, brings in the data, and then matches up the accession numbers of the the object records with some image files that the museums have uploaded into a OneDrive for them, and then they're able to display the images there. So we kind of are acting as a proxy for getting that collections data out there and feeding it into other projects. So that's a really nice example of how it's being used, and museums that have never had their collections online are able to do it in creative ways as well. And then this is a really, really early example, and it's not running as much anymore, but it's a really kind of fun case study of what you can do with just kind of basic information about the object records. So Richard Palmer, who works at the V&A, just did this really quick and dirty piece of work to kind of look at what's in the MDS and start kind of trying to categorize it. It's not kind of meant to be a proper piece of research. He was just tinkering, as he would say, and managed to kind of categorize where different parts of our collections come from, what types of museums are contributing, what the kind of themes generated, or how you could categorize what the types of object records are, and things like that. And in March last year, we ran a hackathon in Leicester, and I think what we wanted to try and do going forward is run more of these kind of hackathons and uh, use those to help kind of really understand what is possible with the data with some really clever people, clever enough, kind of in the room and doing fun things. I do have another case study that the Collections Trust recently ran a hackathon as well, but I don't have any images from it. So hopefully, when I kind of share my presentation afterwards, I can add a little slide in. We can have something from that. But again, there we were kind of looking at how you can. There was a museum service there that started in the kind of 1900s, but before that, lots of collections had been dispersed from their local area, and they were trying to kind of map what objects that should be within their boundaries are not in their boundaries. And we were kind of being able to see like where there are collections related to their locality in different parts of the UK. And that was really interesting as well as kind of this idea of the distributed collection and trying to work out where things are and how they ended up there. So again, some interesting kind of case studies so we can start to play with. Um, But for now, I mean, that's the kind of main overview of what the Museum Data Service is, what the data looks like, how you can access it, and what kind of fun things we have going on. But I'd love to hear from you. Love to have a conversation and see what you're all thinking. Yeah, thank you very much.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Arran. That was a really great overview of the research infrastructure. And it is really great to see all the efforts going into making museum data available for research as well, because I think it has been overlooked for too long. So there are a few questions in the chat. I'm just going to go through them in the order that they came in. The first was from Jenny O'Neill. And I think you might have covered it, but it was just asking what metadata standards are you making use of?
Yeah, so this is quite an interesting one because metadata standards and museums are kind of uncomfortable bedfellows. Maybe they are. Lots of museums have kind of used their own defined cataloging standards, and some of the like. So it's difficult to say there is a defined cataloging standard or metadata standard that we're using. What we're using is the spectrum units of information as a way to align the multiple ways in which museums are catalogued. The Natural History Museum will use a metadata standard that's completely different to the Science Museum, just because of the nature of their collection, the nature of their expertise. But the units of information is what kind of aligns what
Mhm.
they're trying to communicate through the metadata. So yeah, that's our approach.
Okay, great. The next question is from Olga, and she is asking, how can museums license object data, and who do they attribute it to? Is it museum professionals?
Yeah, so this is again, I think we'd probably have a general view that the metadata there is some skill, there's research, there is expertise that goes into generating catalog records. Um, so the licensing is not kind of licensed in terms of monetary license, it's all kind of free use under the Creative Commons licensing, but it's more a case of some museums feel very much that we can go CC0 because this is just factual information and we have no kind of claims to kind of for that. Others take a different approach and think that there is work that's gone into this and that needs to be recognized and attributed. So we wanted to provide that flexibility because we know that through other kind of aggregating kind of projects that have happened in the past, there was quite a low level of sign up from museums in the UK to things like Europeana because they insisted on a strict metadata standard and CC0. And museums just weren't willing to sign up to that in the UK. So we've learned from that and we've offered this flexibility that allows museums to join in a way that feels right for them. So yeah, that's we're just looking for clarity in license rather than kind of a specific one. So I hope that answers your question.
Well, that's great. Well, Olga, if you need anything else, you can let us know in the chat. And I'll move on to the next one. It's about artificial intelligence. So how has AI changed the plans for the MDS over the next few years? And do you use AI to help aggregate the museum's collections or object records? And
So
I'll let
we
you answer that first, and then there's a sub question after.
Yeah, okay, great.
Okay.
Yeah. So we haven't been making use of it in a specific way just yet, but we have just expanded our team. We've brought on a technology manager, and I think we're going to be interested in kind of exploring a little bit further. We're just putting together a proper AI policy, and but generally we're open to it. We're open to it. We're interested to see what people can do with the collections data. We'd love to see if there's ways to kind of help standardize metadata, and that could be fed back into museums, clean their collections data. That would be a great service that we could offer the museums, and also then have this kind of enhanced metadata version of the data possibly. But that's all speculation. So whilst we don't have any concrete plans and we don't currently use it, it's over the next 2 years we're kind of really interested to see what can happen because we've got an openness to it.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely, as you go forward with the policy on AI use, that would be interesting. I think a lot of us are struggling with that topic. So maybe this is something we can
Yeah.
return back to and work together on this. So the next question is from Michael, and he is kind of following on from the use of AI, but asking, do you constrain the crawling? So the kind of other view of AI, do you have to do anything to stop the bots crawling the service?
Yeah, so we haven't had too much of an issue with this just yet. We haven't had any major kind of overrides on the kind of on our servers from it. Um, but we're working with a web developer who kind of has these kind of these checks in place to make sure that we're not getting any malicious attacks. And I think that we're also I feel like I'm going to say we're in the middle of developing quite a lot because we're just bringing on a new head of service, and she will be starting in the next couple of weeks. I can't say who it is yet, but part of what that role is going to be is developing a cyber resilience kind of policy and process as well. So, but we haven't seen huge kind of numbers of crawlers going at our system yet, which is surprising considering we've got kind of 7.5 million object records on there. So that's yeah.
Yeah. Very lucky so far. That's great.
Yeah.
There's a question now in the chat from Mark asking if a museum was creating a digital catalog for the first time, could they make use of the MDS from the outset? So, for example, to host the primary data set.
Yeah. Not to host the primary data set maybe, but to get it online definitely. So we have a range of kind of museums that have joined the Museum Data Service. Some who have just cataloged using a spreadsheet, and then have uploaded that. And we're, I mentioned the Southwest Collections Explorer as an example of how data is being used, and the museum platform is the kind of tool that's doing that. But they've also developed a tool that will allow you to plug into the MDS API, so you can present your collections data on your own website with your own themes and with your own images, using the MDS kind of infrastructure to do that as well. So it wouldn't act as a primary catalog, but you could definitely use it to feed your collections online.
Great. Another question here from Michael. Do you have any relationship, formal or otherwise, with the Towards a National Collection folk? Is that
So we developed independently of them, but we are now working in close collaboration with the project that's come on from Towards Natural Collection, which is called Enrich. Um, so they're in the middle of doing some kind of really interesting scoping work. We're in constant conversations with them on multiple levels. So kind of the directors are meeting and talking, and then at an operational level, we're talking as well and feeding into the different parts of it. So yes, whilst we were not part of Tank originally, we remain close friends and allies.
good to hear? Another question from Olga in the chat just now. What are the museum's opinion of you diverting user engagement from their own interfaces if they have one?
Yeah, this has been an interesting one actually. So at the moment, we're not able to provide the museums with specific statistics about how often their object records have appeared in a search. And that's sometimes proving a blocker for some museums wanting to join. But lots of other museums are seeing the MDS is something a little bit different to their collections online. Where I think you can see from the kind of how we present the data, we're not a kind of curated collections online with lovely images and kind of aimed at general user engagement. We are a tool for allowing researchers to access the data in a different way. And some museums are choosing to put data that they wouldn't put on their own collections online onto MDS because it's got a different kind of audience. It's not saying the general public can't search MDS, it's open for anyone to search, but it's got a different kind of emphasis to it. So some museums have been reticent until we can provide those statistics because they will say it's not worth the effort if you can't provide that feedback back to us. And I think that's a fair comment, and I can't argue back on that. But we do say that being part of something bigger, having your collections be cross-searchable, you may not be able to get statistics back about how effective that's being, but you being a part of that is a productive thing to be able to kind of talk about in any reporting you do. So, and that's working for quite a few people, so it's good.
Okay, great, thanks. I think there's one more question in the chat from Michael, just saying, sorry if I missed this, but how are records maintained / managed over time For example, if a contributing museum wants to update some of its records?
So when a museum joins the Museum Data Service, I mentioned that we take them we bring their data in via a piece of middleware called the SIM, which is managed by a company called Knowledge Integration in the UK, in Sheffield. I set up an account for an administrator from the museum, so they can log into the SIM themselves, they can update their metadata, they can kind of upload a new file, or if they don't do that, then within a year, normally I will contact them and say it's time to kind of think about doing an update. So we don't have a hard and fast policy on how often the data has to be updated, but we don't really want it to be older than a year. We've got some museums who are updating us quarterly. We've had some museums that have been over a year and haven't updated yet. So yeah, I think essentially the mechanism would be that you re-export your data and we replace the old file with a new one. And then the way the SIM analyzes the data, it's got a unique identifier and it says, okay, this is the same unique identifier, but this data is different, so I'll update that. Or this unique identifier is no longer in the data set, I should delete that. And that's how it kind of operates. So, but that's done on a schedule defined by the museum with a little leading from us.
So do you have much of a hand in that process? So is it quite manual at your side, or is it sort of semi-automated, or?
Yes, semi-automated, I suppose. So there are some museums that feel more confident. They know their login details will go in and they'll just send me an update saying, oh, I've just updated the data set. And then all I need to go in and do is press a button. And that's fine. Others will send an email and say, I think I should probably update it. I can't remember anything. And then I'll jump on a Teams call with them and kind of take 10, 15 minutes kind of doing that upload with them. And then for museums that have connected using an API, then I just do a monthly kind of kickoff and recall that as well.
Oh, that's great. It's great to see that you're getting such kind of hands-on support with these infrastructures. I think that makes all the difference in terms of getting used. We have one more question, and then I think we'll have to kind of draw the question and answers to a close so we can wrap up. But a question from Jonathan in the chat just saying, do all the listed museums/collections on the service have objects associated with said museum/collection in the service?
So yeah, so the two kind of sections of the website I mentioned about. So in the Explore Collection section, the museum may not have been involved with us so far. So that is a list of the museums that are accredited that we know that's data made publicly available by the Arts Council England. If there is a narrative overview, then normally they have been involved and given us that narrative overview. If there are object records, then they've had to be very much in touch with me, and we've gone through the onboarding process together and they've signed an agreement. So there's kind of stages of being involved, I guess. So not everything on the Explore collections has object records on the MDS, nor have they been involved with us yet.
Great. I think that's clarified everything. So I think we'll draw the Q&A to a closer. I know Al has put your email address in the chat. So if anybody has any other questions that we didn't get to today, by all means, get in touch with Arran. And for now, I will just say thank you again, and I'll hand back to Al just for a couple of wrap-up steps. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Joy. Thanks, Arran. Yeah, excellent presentation. We always kind of judge how popular a topic is by the question, the Q&A. So yeah, thank you to everyone else for contributing your questions as well. So as I mentioned earlier, just want to finish off with one question and a bit of information about our next topic as well. So given that I've asked you how familiar you are with the MDS, only seems right to move on to, do you have a better understanding of the Museum Data Service and the services it offers, following Arran's excellent presentation as well. So always good to have this recorded as well, to know how much we got from this as well. So again, thank you so much, Arran, for your presentation. Very ambitious targets as well, to get all that information together, and such an important role as well. My partner actually is a historian by trade, so she's currently working away at a PhD. So yeah, certainly aware of the importance of museums as well. So yeah, thank you for your work there as well. But as I can see, we're coming to a close here. So I'll leave this this question open. So please do let us know your thoughts on this by completing the WooClap. But I'll just move back to the presentation so I can tell you about our next topic. So in 3 weeks' time, on the 6th of May, we're going to be welcoming the Archaeology Data Service with our guest speaker, Dr. Nikki Garland. So the Archaeology Data Service is a leading accredited repository in the UK for archaeology and historic environment data, with over 25 years of experience supporting research, learning, teaching with free, high quality and dependable resources. So that'll be coming to us in 3 weeks' time. It's going to be the fourth in our series. So I'd just like to say thank you once again, Arran, for joining us today. A really excellent presentation. We'll be sending a thank you email around with links to the full slide deck for today, as well as the recording and a link to our previous webinars as well, the PSDI and Biofair that happened in February and March, along with a link to the Archaeology Data Service as well. So I'll just leave you with a slide on us, the Digital Curation Center. So please do follow us across our social media channels. As I mentioned earlier, we do have our International Digital Curation Conference announcement location coming up soon. So you can follow us on Blue Sky, on LinkedIn as well. But in our thank you email, I'll also give you links to Arran's email address as well as their website as well. So it's very important to get on to find out if they can support with your work as well. So with that, I'll bring us to a close. Thank you once again, Arran, for joining us. Thank you all for your questions and your participation today in the WooClap. And do let us know if you have any questions by reaching out to us across our social media channels or via our website. Thank you again.
Thanks so much, all. Thanks, Al, for hosting.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone.